Welcome to the Art&Logic Minimum Viable Podcast. Today we'll be talking with Paul Hershenson, one of the co-founders of Art&Logic, and Touradj Barman, co-founder of UpNGo, a pay-at-the-table solution for restaurants. Welcome, Paul. Welcome, Touradj. How you doing?
Hey, Carlos. Hey, Paul. Great to be with you today.
Yeah, you guys do.
Yeah, Touradj, one of the reasons I thought it'd be really exciting to have this talk with you, not just because we worked with you on UpNGo recently, but also because you have a pretty lengthy history with the company, and I was hoping maybe you guys could tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I think I've had 3 or 4 different relationships with Art&Logic going back maybe 17 years or so. I was originally a client, and then I actually worked there for a little while. And then I have been a client again once or twice. And now I'm a friend of Art&Logic.
Yeah, we also did a startup together.
Oh, yeah, that's true. We had a startup as well.
Yep.
That's yet another relationship. That was a good time.
So what was the first project that you worked on together?
Well, back in 2005 or so, when I was still in New Haven getting my MBA, I had this idea for a group messaging platform, which actually is a lot like Slack, but I had called it Go Groups, and it was before Slack existed. And I was looking for a company to build out, hey, the minimum viable product. And so I did a bunch of Googling, and I found Paul.
And do you remember that first contact, Paul?
Yeah, I remember the inquiry came in, and Touradj had said that he was a student at the School of Management at Yale. And I had gone to Yale myself many years ago. And I thought, okay, this one's for me. So I picked that one up. And Touradj and I hit it off right away. And I thought Go Groups was a fantastic idea. It's one of those things where timing is everything. I think Go Groups had every bit as much potential as Slack. But I think you were maybe 10 years too soon. The world just wasn't ready for you.
Well, I think I remember pitching to a lot of people and they couldn't understand why you needed a persistent groups around an instant messenger. But to be fair, it was also my first swing at the bat. So I think there are things that I could have done a little bit differently back then to counteract some of the timing. But it's definitely true that timing is really important.
When you first started working on Go Groups, what prompted the impulse to create that?
Well, before business school, I worked at a management consulting firm. And at that firm, we basically were trying to solve this problem where emails are a little too cumbersome and text messaging was a little too ephemeral because the groups would disappear when you logged out. Messages weren't persistent. So I just thought, hey, there's really this situation where a lot of people in companies have these working groups of 2, 3, 4, 5 people, maybe a little bit more. And they just need a constant thread of real-time communication. And that was really why I had the idea. I just wanted to solve that problem. And I figured if it was a need that we had, it was a need that a lot of other people had as well. Unfortunately, we didn't commercialize it too far, but we did patent it and managed to sell the IP to LinkedIn, which now belongs to Microsoft.
Yeah, and we saw the value in Go Groups right away because being a remote software company, we had those same types of problems to solve. So the idea of having multimedia persistent chat was really appealing. And I can't count how many times you tried to persuade me to drop the tool that we had been using. I think it was First Class at that time, which everybody hated. Maybe we should have tried it, but it was just too much of a disruption we always would refer to that tool as being the Art&Logic office. And it was just kind of a bridge too far to contemplate dropping it, but maybe we should have. Now we're on Slack, so we ended up there anyway.
Well, the law firm that we used for our company, Wilson Sonsini, they were our single paying customer and they used Go Groups one summer for all of their interns. So we did get it into use and see how people worked with it. And it was definitely MVP. There was a lot that could have been invested into it further, but there was definitely a demand for it.
And what happened next in our relationship with you after that?
I think Paul liked the way I think about certain things and asked me if I wanted to help with the business development at Art&Logic. And so the timing was good for that at the time. So I spent a couple of years with A&L. We brought in a lot of great clients.
Do you remember any? It's been such a long time at this point.
I remember the TaylorMade project. That was a really big one.
So that's still going.
Oh, really?
We're still working on that. Yeah.
Oh, that's incredible. It's been a long time. It must be pretty far along now. That was a really great app is a great app for their distributed sales team to manage inventory in all the different stores. That was an exciting one. I know we did one. There was a consortium of music groups that was creating some kind of data audio format. I don't remember. It was kind of like all the big names. And so we got to do that. That was really a fun one. I think during the time that I was there, I must have been part of 20, 30, 40 projects being sold. Unfortunately, I don't remember all of them. But I also remember that it was the time when iPhone apps were really new and we used to get these endless requests for a mirror app or a flashlight app or, what have you. Everyone thought the ticket to wealth was their very own iPhone app back in the late aughts. and early teens. That was definitely an interesting time.
Yeah, that might be a good segue into the startup that we did together because that was really the motivation for it. We called the company iEverywhere, and it was a do-it-yourself app builder. I was thinking, okay, there are all these requests coming in for iPhone apps, and I remember thinking someday there are going to be 1 million apps in the App Store. And at this point, there were probably 20,000 or something. I don't know what the number is now, but it's way, way more than 1 million. Yeah, I was thinking those apps are going to be developed, but they're not going to be developed by companies like Art&Logic because it's just too expensive. So just like with websites, somebody's going to build a tool to help people make their own iPhone apps. And I thought, well, maybe we can do that. And I think I pitched it to you and maybe twisted your arm into saying yes. And along with a couple of other folks from A&L as a kind of a side thing, we went out and we did this company, iEverywhere. I remember it being a lot of fun, and we actually had a fair number of apps. I think maybe over 100 at one point. The idea, I think, was still solid. I mean, there were other app builders that were competing with us and that had a pretty good run. So I think we had a pretty good idea. I don't know. What do you remember about it?
Well, it definitely was fitting for the times. Everyone wanted to make apps, and we certainly had all the inbound inquiries. So it's really nice when you're starting a company and you have a new product, speaking to the idea of an MVP, the best thing you can do is get users on it quickly and get clients quickly. So to have that flow of people coming in, we had to be definitely very selective about who we offered this opportunity to because there needed to be like a uniformity to what we were building, right? Because we didn't want to build some really scattered thing. So what we ended up doing was taking projects where people had media they wanted to share so that the apps were really based around showcasing media. So I know we had a couple of different musicians. Pat Boone was, I think, one of our first apps, and Sonny Rollins.
I remember that. We made a whopping amount of revenue from Pat Boone. It was $5 a month for about 5 years.
Yeah, I think we were both too nice when it comes to charging those initial clients.
I think I would agree with that, yeah.
But we ended up getting a lot of great clients. One of our clients was the Berklee College of Music in Boston. And I remember myself and John, who was one of our other co-founders, we flew out to Boston. It was fun to be out there again. And there was this one guy, the guy who was actually the most successful customer. I don't remember what it was, but he had some kind of list of quotes, or it was like a list of something. And he put it in the App Store for a couple of dollars. And the guy was making like thousands of dollars a month. I forgot what he was selling exactly, but it was like some kind of content that he had. Maybe it was like legal.
So is this turning into the old man podcast where we did something. We can't remember what it was we did.
Well, it's funny because what you're talking about also resonates with what's going on now with ChatGPT. People are using it to create everything, and you can create a software program. You can create an outline for an article. I read about some students who were trying to use it actually recently for their college essays. It's present, this idea of facilitating technology for others so that they can have access to technology that would otherwise be outside of their expertise. And so I think that's kind of cool that projects you mentioned so far head in that direction in terms of making things more available and more practical.
Yeah, of course. I mean, we didn't make the content for people, but we helped make the apps that showcased it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I know I learned a lot from that, trying to make so many apps and get them through the App Store process. And I think we really got to evolve along with the App Store and just see how all their requirements were growing and growing and growing. Things like, it used to be that when you published an app, you needed 2 graphics. There was the splash screen and the icon. And I think by the time we're done, you needed to supply the icon in 57 different sizes. And there was like 500 graphics you had to submit when you wanted to release an app. So it was just kind of neat to be part of that whole evolution. I don't even know what it is now because now we're doing web, but it was kind of neat to see that evolve.
Yeah, it was one of the surprising things, the thing that we didn't fully anticipate and that ended up being the headwind that prevented the company from being successful was just the overhead of dealing with Apple in the App Store. We had a really aggressively priced product that didn't allow enough time for us to service individual clients with a lot of care and touch, but that's what was necessary to actually get an app into the App Store. We were basically spending more money in our time trying to get the apps into the store than the clients were paying us. And so the business model wasn't effective because of that.
Yeah, that part wasn't necessarily the most scalable. I think we could have spent some time and really thought about how much time we were all spending on it and priced that particular part of the activity a little bit differently. I think we were just really generous with the pricing because we were founders and technologists, and we wanted people to use this new thing that we were creating, like the energy everyone had around it. I think also with a lot of those apps just being collections of content, I had this idea that, hey, maybe there should just be one app with all these different collections of content that people could populate. And that led to the next chapter.
That's true. That was a cool evolution of it.
I kind of branched off and made this company called Groovy, like Groovy without the G. And we made an iPhone app, an Android app, a website. And the whole idea was that people could create, we called them pods, these little pods of media. And then they could be very social. People could, whether it was photos or videos or documents or whatever, totally mix and match these things and just put them out. And they were interactive. You could follow them. You could follow people. You could comment, like. It was really just this multi-dimensional media content collection you could build. And I spent a few years working on that.
Yeah, that sounds like people would still need that. It's a really impressive idea, actually, especially because we're so siloed on different social media platforms.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, there's like a few things that you can bank on people are always going to want to do with technology. One of them is communication. So therefore, chat and group messaging and things like that. And another one is sharing media. Obviously, there's tools like the ones everybody knows, Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, things like that. But there's pretty much infinite ways to bundle and share media online. And I'm sure there'll be even more that emerge. This one was a little bit more comprehensive and organized in terms of how you put all the information together. And speaking of MVPs, I think the broadness of it was one of the things that was challenging because we really had to think about who has bundles of content that they would want to put together. One of the things that we explored was working with schools. We were working with a lot of schools and helping students put their portfolios together. Towards the end, some of the other things we tried, at the time, the whole maker community was really having some time under the sun. So we thought about that area. We also spent some time, believe it or not, I think the last thing we played around with, we talked to this marketing consultant who apparently worked with Steve Jobs back in the day. And her firm actually was really, really good. One of the ideas that they gave us, which we ended up running with, was makeup artists and people who do nails and hair, basically the beauty industry. And so as a test, we made all these landing pages, whether you're a makeup artist or you do hair or you do nails, and we spent some ads and we told these people, hey, you can put all your work together in a nice little portfolio. And it actually took off. There were so many of these pods with different hairstyles and different nail styles. And I remember going at one point to Las Vegas to this beauty convention. It's huge. I don't even remember what it was called. But just seeing all these creative people in that industry, and even though I don't have, I just look not as made up, but I thought all that stuff was really cool. So I think that's one of the things, if you're thinking about an MVP, you really got to think very specifically about what is the problem you're solving for who. And I know I'm skipping ahead a little bit here, but that was really why I think UpNGo had such a great start, because it's such a well-defined problem, helping someone pay at the table.
Yeah, let's segue into UpNGo. Did you start working on that before the pandemic?
Yes. This idea came to be around 2016 or 17 was when I was thinking about the idea. So it was like maybe October of 16, my friend and I, who also used to work at A&L, Scott Weber, we incorporated this company. So backing up a bit, the whole purpose of UpNGo is to provide an easy way to pay at the table. Everybody knows what it feels like when you're done eating and you just want to leave. And everybody knows what it feels like when someone wants to split the check with you in sort of an unfair way and nobody wants to pay for more than they ordered. So the idea was, hey, give people a super easy way to pay the check with their phone and bounce, get up and go. The problem was very well defined. What I needed was a customer so that we would build it not in a vacuum, but build it to work inside of a real business environment. And I had recently become friends with a local restaurateur named Matt Hoyt. He was the owner of a very popular kind of indie restaurant here in San Diego called Starlight. And Matt said, hey, look, this is a wonderful idea. Let's build it to work in Starlight. So Scott and I spent so much time getting it to work in Starlight. He had said, if this thing is going to work, it needs to talk to my point of sale system. So point of sale is the computer system restaurants use for checks. And he said, but the thing is, I use this one called Aloha, and it's impossible to integrate with Aloha. So let me know. And knowing me, I kind of like challenges. As soon as someone tells me something's not impossible, I'm going to try to do it. So before we had that Aloha integration, we started developing everything else about our solution, the whole payment flow, just waiting until we had a POS integration. And we even were looking at a backup POS to integrate with. Well, it's a big story, but we managed to get a partnership with Aloha, which was incredible. Then we built this thing to work in Starlight. The very first payment was in 2007. And then from there, we grew. We added 7 or 8 more restaurants locally, and then we started going national. We got up to about 100 restaurants across the country, including a big restaurant group on the East Coast. And then the pandemic hit. I don't know if you just want me to like be a storyteller over here.
Storytelling is wonderful because I like hearing it, and also talking about how you dealt with that and how you moved through that is actually pretty important.
Yeah, I mean, I love to talk about that actually because it's such an interesting progression. 2019, we had 100 grand and we hired this lady to do sales from NCR, and she used to work there and she was great. I learned the ropes from her. I got indoctrinated into the culture and the world of NCR. NCR is a parent of Aloha. So I sort of grew up with Aloha in a sense. And then one thing led to another. She had to move. And so she quit. And I thought, well, look, this has been kind of weird that our company has one employee and it's not me. So I quit what I was doing at the time. And my very first paycheck with UpNGo was January of 2020. So I was raring to go, very excited. Literally on December 31st, we had closed this group of 20 restaurants that was going to get us up to 100. At the time, I was measuring how many payments are going through UpNGo every week. And I tell you, we were getting so close to having $100,000 a week paid on UpNGo. And I was so excited. And then all of a sudden, everything started closing. And people would call me and they're like, oh, what's going to happen with UpNGo, blah, blah. And I was just continue to work on it. And I remember from being right around almost $100,000 paid on UpNGo a week, we went all the way down. The worst week that we had that year was $2,900. Because believe it or not, people were still using UpNGo for to-go orders because it was contactless. And then all of a sudden, boom, the whole world knew about contactless payments. And every restaurant wanted contactless payments. And I was getting 200 emails a day. So many restaurant chains, brands that I was familiar with were calling me and signing up. It was very exciting. And fast forward today, we now have, I think last week was almost $9 million paid on UpNGo. So go from 100,000 to 2,900 to 8.9 million. So it's like quite a lot of change going on.
That's remarkable.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy.
So what was our involvement with UpNGo?
There were a few times where Art&Logic was involved. I mean, for one thing, my co-founder, Scott, I met while I was at Art&Logic. He's an extraordinary, really just extraordinary guy all around, extraordinary developer. So, that relationship, I have Paul to thank. But beyond that, we added our own engineers, but we ended up hiring this other really stellar engineer from Art&Logic named Andrew Palumbo. That's one thing I liked about A&L, lots of really talented engineers. That was when we decided, hey, we want to have Micros too, which is this other POS, not just Aloha. And Micros, Aloha is hard to integrate. Micros doesn't even, there really isn't even a guide. You've just got to figure it out. So, we needed a really good problem solver like Andrew. And one thing led to another. And I think it was something like a year and a half before Andrew finally said, I'm tired of working 8 days a week for you. So then Andrew disappeared.
He does, by the way, speak highly of that time and that experience. Loved working with Touradj and Scott. It was really great. Loved the product. Loved working on it. Just needed a break.
Well, I would work with Andrew any day. He's really great. As far as UpNGo goes, that was probably the primary engagement, was just getting Andrew Palumbo to do our Micros integration. These integrations, I always tell people, it's not that you do it and then it's done. It's a living thing. Now we have a team of full-time engineers, and they're all very talented as well. There's a lot of maintenance. First it was Micros 3700, then it was Micros Symphony. And the way we do things, we always like to own the integration. There's companies out there that my competitors use to make their job easy and not have to worry about these complicated POS integrations. But I think you definitely lose something when you do that, because payments are this real-time thing that's very important. And you really need that connection into the POS. And also, you don't want to be sharing your margin with someone if you don't have to. We always do our own POS integrations. We've got a couple more underway. We're the exclusive pay at the table for this iPad POS called Lavu. That's getting ready to launch soon. We recently started working on our Toast integration. That's another fast-growing POS. We've done one with a company that has, a couple companies have their own POS, and we've done integrations with them as sort of like pilots. We'll see where they go. But we've also built a really good framework for adding these POSs, so we're able to get them done in not too much time.
I would say that one of the things that I really appreciate about having known you for all this time, Touradj, is that your story is a story of entrepreneurial persistence. And I think it's really illustrative of what it takes to be successful as an entrepreneur. So you first contacted me when you were just in grad school. And you've told us about a handful of different attempts at success. And we had a little bit of success together with iEverywhere, and you've had more success with others. But it was really UpNGo that really hit. And you never quit. You never stop believing in yourself. You never stop having ideas. And I know you're going to have another 100 ideas before all is said and done. And because you have that persistence, that stubbornness to say, I'm not going to give up, here you are today. And I think that's a wonderful and inspiring story. And it's been really a pleasure to have a small part in seeing it unfold.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. I appreciate your support. I have had some people tell me that I'm persistent. In a sense, I don't feel it myself. But I know it's there. I get excited about something. I've had some people call me a serial entrepreneur. That's not my goal. My goal is to make one big thing that I stick with for a long time to come. And I've never been happier than working on UpNGo. The thing that makes me excited is having people use something that you've created and enjoy it and benefit from it. Everyone who uses UpNGo, they just have such a great experience. It's the easiest way to pay. It's reliable. Reliability is a really big thing when you're paying at the table. You want to make sure the payment gets from the guest to the server without any issues. And you want to make sure it's very easy to click through and make your payment, split. Back to Apple, right? We work with Apple Pay. We also work with Google Pay, Venmo, all these things. And even the restaurant's gift cards, bringing it all together. And, there's a lot of evolution. One of the things that is a guiding principle is like, on one hand, you kind of have to balance, okay, I have this big vision. Where can we go next? Because you've got to be a little bit ahead of where the market is today. But at the same time, you don't want to go off in the wrong direction. Fortunately, we have a lot of clients. We're in over 700 restaurants, probably going to be 1,500 by summertime. So we have a lot of clients and we have a ton of usage. So we really do get real feedback about what clients want. And that allows us to see the patterns. Okay, if we have 5 people asking for something and 1 person asking for this obscure thing, and we sort of believe in this other thing that's kind of similar to what these 5 people are asking, it helps you make the decision. So one of the things that I'm really proud of, I was talking to another entrepreneur and they were asking me like, this was a VC funded entrepreneur. And they're like, I just found out that we have $1 million of throwaway code. And I was like, what? How can you have $1 million of throwaway code? And they were asking me how much throwaway code we have. And I'm like, I'm pretty sure we don't have any throwaway code. I mean, we don't throw away code. I was thinking about it the other day. It's almost like just-in-time development. You figure out what do people need and we release it. And what's really exciting is we're at a point now where we have well over 100,000 people a week paying with UpNGo, 110,000 maybe. So as soon as we put a feature out there, people are using it. And we get a lot of feedback. We recently made this survey that pops up at the end of when you pay with 4 easy questions, 1 to 5 stars. How's the food service, the atmosphere, and your payment experience? And literally we have 57% of people completing that survey, which is incredible. You ask people what kind of survey response rate do you get? It's usually 2 to 5%. We're getting 57%. And that's for 2 reasons. The survey is delivered at the right time. It's not an email that you get 3 hours later. And also the content, it's 4 easy questions. These surveys ask you too many questions, even if they think they're doing it in a nice way. So we put the survey feature out and it's only at one of our clients so far, a big group with 100 locations or so. And like I said, 57% of the people are responding to it. The other thing we did is we calculated, or I should say we approximated the NPS score, which is Net Promoter Score. Typically that should be 1 to 10 and you take I think it's the 9 and 10s, and you subtract 1s, 2s, and 3s or something like this. And you take your promoters minus your detractors. But you can approximate it with 5 stars. And we did that for our client, and their food service and atmosphere was in the 80s, but the payment experience was in the 90s. So those are both very high NPS scores. But I was just really excited that it's like almost everybody is giving the payment experience on UpNGo a 5 with some 4s and a very small number of anything else. Anyway, the point is, if your company is doing well, people are using it, it's not one MVP. Everything you do has to have that MVP mindset. You want to build just in time, just what's needed, get it out there, have people use it. You don't want a lot of friction. You don't want a lot of fluff. It's just to the point. I think another reason the surveys are popular is because I've watched people pay with UpNGo. They pay their bill, something that would take 15 minutes, and they do it in 7 or 8 seconds. And they're just looking at their phone like, what else can I do with this awesome thing? And so we give them a survey, and then they go with it. They take the survey. We're going to be adding more and more things that they can do at the end just because people seem to really like using it. Sometimes I like to joke that we're very good at, we make people separate themselves from their money very easily. Our goal is to take your money quickly and painlessly and get it to the restaurant.
It is a really great user experience. It's so much better than having to wait for your server to take your credit card and run it.
Thank you.
And given the amount of data that you're managing, do you guys rely on AI or machine learning at all?
Well, no, because the data that we interact with, There's really no guesswork. You're looking up what's on someone's check, you're presenting it to them, you're guiding them through how they may want to split it, what kind of tip they may want to leave, what payment method they want. That's the kind of thing that we're doing. However, of course, there's a lot of data. Those are some of the things that I'm MVPing for the future. Like, what can we do with this data? We know a lot of things about how much money people spend in restaurants. I could tell you that on Valentine's Day, the average payment on UpNGo was $89, whereas normally it's $74. I know how long it takes people from when they put in their order to when they pay. I know what people are ordering, if it's meat or whatnot, even the size of groups, what percentage of checks are for 2 people versus 5 people. There's a lot of data there. There's a lot that you can do with it. It's a matter of building something that's useful around that information and making it available. And we do have something in the works, probably will be out maybe around summertime, that I'm pretty excited about.
I think it's interesting, Touradj, that the process that you described is really so aligned with the lean startup approach. You really have made your customers the source of your direction, which is something we talk about all the time with our clients, but it's hard, I think, for people to see the power in that. And I think UpNGo is a really compelling example of how that could guide you in building out your product. That's another thing that's impressive about that.
Yeah, thanks. I think a lot of my competitors, which all came after me, because when we started this, there wasn't anything else. The things that existed were apps. One thing that's notable about UpNGo is that there's no app. So QR code prints out, you scan it, pay, no app needed. But yeah, I think one of the most important things is when you have constraints, that helps you focus. My competitors, there's many of them that have tens of millions of dollars in funding. You go look at them and it's like, they don't even have as many customers as we do. So what are they doing with all this money? But I think sometimes if you have too many resources, you lose focus. Being that we have raised millions of dollars, but it's angel funding, it's not the same magnitude as institutional funding. And we have revenue, which is great as well. But yeah, just try to really focus on what's needed. And that makes a better product. It makes a product come out quicker. It makes a product that really serves the problem at hand. I firmly believe in that approach.
I like that you don't have any throwaway code. I hadn't realized that that was a metric that venture-backed startups were using. It's like, okay, $1 million of throwaway code.
That was one conversation I had. I don't know how universal it is, but the question really caught me by surprise. I mean, is it true there isn't even a line of throwaway code at UpNGo? Of course. I couldn't even think about something we made that we're not using anymore.
Thank you, Touradj. Thank you, Paul. It was a pleasure having you join us today. And to those of you out there, thanks for listening. If you want to hear more from Art&Logic, you can find our Minimum Viable podcast through Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google, or anywhere you get your podcasts.